Hi everyone, welcome to this video about how to pitch the Lanshan 1 tent. The Lanshan 1's an amazing tent. It's really good value, but it can be tricky to pitch nicely. So in this video I'm going to show you how I do it, and hopefully along the way there'll be some tips and tricks that you'll find useful. Inevitably, no matter how carefully you've packed it away, when you get the tent out of the bag, it's going to look like this. So what I'm going to look for now is the 4 corners, and I'm going to pitch them out into a rough rectangle. Right, so I've got it pegged out into a very rough, long, thin rectangle, and the pegs are pretty much lined up with the seam and off facing towards the opposite corner. So I'm not being too precise, but that's a good starting point. It is a bit confusing on a Lanshan when you get it out of the bag, because there's actually a fifth sort of corner, if you like, this pegging out point at the rear, and that can get a bit confusing. So what I've done to avoid confusion is this fifth pegging out point, I've got a bit of yellow tat tied around the loop just to me so that I know which one it is, and I don't think it's one of the key corners, and we're going to leave that corner for now. Next step is to get the walking pole ready. The height of the pole, i.e. the length of the pole, is quite important. All walking poles have got length markings along the shaft, here and here. And I've got this pole set at 125. With the tent laid out like this, you can easily spot the black triangle that forms the head of the front of the tent. And at the top of that, there is a loop and a little reinforced area for the pole to sit in. If we have a look at the inside of that, so here there's a reinforced pocket area. I'm going to grab the head of the pole now and lay it down inside that reinforced area. Now with my left hand I'm going to reach around, grab the top of the pole, lift it up, poke it into the ground, and hopefully that should stay standing. Well, what do you know? The next thing to do is to get the main guy line set up. For this video I'm working with a setup as it comes from the factory and the guy line arrangement. This is one of the things that's most commonly changed, and in the modifications video I'll talk about that. At the bottom of the main doors there is a famous ram's head clip. We're going to leave that attached to the bottom of the door. Half or a quarter of the way along the main guy line is a loop. Don't undo that. It isn't a tangle or a defect from the factory. It's set at a very exact height. So I'm going to put the peg through that and peg out the main guy line. And now I've done the front guy line, I can go and peg out the 5th corner of the bottom of the tent. So already the tent is looking in pretty good shape. The gap around the bottom edge of the fly is consistent pretty much all around the tent. But the next thing I'm going to do is just adjust the tensioners around the sides to make sure there are no creases in the fly sheet. You'll notice that I haven't spoken about the inner tent at all yet. We've only been dealing with the outer, the fly sheet and the main pegging out points. You need to get the outer set up nice and flat and with good shape before you even consider the inner. Right, now so when you look at the tent from the side, you'll see that it's not symmetrical, it's asymmetrical. This front edge with the main entrance is steeper than the back entrance. So the inner has to sit within that. There's always going to be good clearance between the inner and the front door. What we need to focus on is the clearance between the inner and the back sides of the tent. I've opened up the front doors now, and that really shows you well the asymmetrical shape and how the inner will sit within the outer. If I go around to the front, so I still haven't pegged out the inner. The bottom peg out points are still floating, and likewise there's no footprint or anything in place. And the first thing to do for that is to move the base of the pole further away, so further out towards the front, so it's no longer vertical. But I'm going to move it out by let's say 6 inches or so. Now at the base of the inner, where the pole sits, there is a little tab with a metal eyelet in it and a bit of string as well in this case, and that is supposed to go around the base of the pole. And because I've moved the pole forward, when that gets attached to the pole, it's going to pull the inner nicely forward away from the outer. So I've placed the loop around the bottom of the pole now. It can be quite a fiddly job. In the modifications video, I've got a good tip of a different way of doing that. Okay, so with the position of the pole set, I'm now going to work my way around the base and pick out the inner. I'm going to start at these front edges and then work my way around. Hey, it's done. One of the great things about the Lanshan 1 is that it has this T-zip option, which a lot of people prefer because it gives much easier access in and out. It also makes my job much easier now of showing you the inside of the tent floor. So you can see it's nice and flat with no creases. And also importantly, if I move to the corner of the bathtub is nice and vertical. So we've got a nice vertical edge there. And if I just look down the length of the side, you can see that the pole is sitting 8 or 10 centimeters in front of the natural straight line of the inner, and that's helping a lot as well. We need to look at the all-important separation between inner and outer, and on the side we've got a good 8 or 10 centimeters clearance at the moment. And that's before we've tensioned up any of the side pull-out points. So the only thing remaining now is the 3 guy lines for pull-out points, and we leave them to the very end. Before I'm going to adjust them, I'm going to make sure that the front door is closed. Okay, so this is where a lot of people go wrong. The point of these side pull-out points is to prevent the fly sheet from collapsing onto the inner. It's not to pull out the fly sheet in the inner too much. They don't have the strength or direction of pull to do that. So this time I've added a lot of tension to those side pull-out points. So they're taking the brunt of the strain rather than the pull-out points around the bottom. And look at that ugly shape. We got creases, we got sagging, we've got flapping. Can you imagine being inside this tent on a windy night? Ah, horrendous. Right, that's looking a lot happier now, a lot smoother sides, a lot more sleek wind shedding shape. It's worth mentioning the angle of the front pole. Now, it looks like it's at quite a big slant, doesn't it? It's sort of leaning quite steeply. But there's 2 reasons why that's the right thing. Firstly, it means that the inner top is nice and flat and smooth inside. If I move back, and let's have a bit more of perspective, if we look at sideways, you can see that here, the angle of the pole is directly in line with the front of the tent there, once the camera decides to focus. So if the loads are equal, front and back, then the combined forces are pushing the pole down into the ground, and it won't skid around out of place. Just having a look around at the separation between the inner and the outer now. At the rear of the tent you can see it's quite generous all the way around, so there shouldn't be too much risk of any contact. Now, in order to stop the inner flapping around too much and to maximise the interior space, we can make good use of these 2. This is the rollback attachment for the inner, and this is sort of the matching one for the outer. So with them connected, now you can see that there's a nice pull sideways on the inner, just making sure that it stays nicely pulled out. So that's the Lanshan 1, nicely pitched with the pole height at 125, which seems to suit it well. Just going to show you what happens if we use different pole heights now. So now I've lowered the poles down to 120. Not a huge difference in the height of the pole, but look what difference it's made to the way that the tent's sitting. Can you see that here it's kind of got this sort of shallow J shape to it, and that's the same as well on the sides as well. Look at that, there's sort of a J at the bottom. So it's not sitting as comfortably, but it is sitting very low to the ground. Now the height's set at 130, and there's much better clearance around all the way underneath the fly. But look at the front. There's a huge gap underneath there. Now that would be fantastic in hot weather when you really need lots of ventilation. Right, so there it is, nicely set up. And look at the size of those vestibules, and the amount of interior space on the Lanshan one is fantastic for the weight. The way it's sitting, the bathtub's got nice vertical sides and a nice smooth floor. All good. So those are my suggestions about how to pitch the Lanshan 1 tent. If you're interested in Lanshan tents and wild camping, then subscribe to my channel, because there's videos about how to use and modify the tents, and also examples of me using them out and about wild camping.